morning and welcome to you all. My name is Carolyn Deer-Bobek and I'm the Director of the Forum on Trade, Environment and the SDGs. It's a great pleasure to be here with you today and to initiate the first plenary session on day one of European Development Days 2021. The topic of our session this morning is Fast Forward, New Business Models for a Green and Circular Recovery. So before introducing our excellent speakers, I'd like just to focus a minute on what we mean when we talk about a green and circular economy. If we ask someone on the street, someone who takes climate issues seriously, she or he would likely describe a green recovery using some of the key phrases that have been circulating in the media and in policy circles. A recovery that puts people and the planet first, a new normal, a recovery that will help societies build back better, fairer, greener, and more resilient than we were before. So for leaders and experts like those we have with us today, the challenge is making that happen, turning this appealing vision and talk of putting sustainable and inclusive recovery at the heart of our responses to COVID-19 into concrete action. It means defining the right package of national and international environment, regulatory, financial and fiscal policies and measures to respond to and recover from COVID-19 in ways that can remedy climate change and inequalities within and between nations. And this will demand enormous international cooperation. So that's exactly the challenge our speakers will take up today. Here we'll focus also on the circular economy as part of that package of solutions. And as my colleagues earlier have mentioned this morning, this means looking beyond the take, make and waste model of the economy over the last century or so to a more circular approach that aims to design out waste and pollution, keep products and material in use through a greater focus on reuse, sharing, repair, manufacturing and recycling, and that will also regenerate natural systems. So in our session today, we're going to focus on new pathways and policies and tools available to countries and businesses to progress towards more circular economies and more inclusive and sustainable development. Specifically, our speakers will look at how circular business models can support the private sector in developing countries to move towards an effective green recovery and build climate resilience. We'll hear some concrete examples of how this can work to the advantage of some of those most affected by the pandemic, such as MSMEs and women in particular. We'll hear about what's been happening so far in terms of policies to stimulate recovery, and how we can ensure that a lower carbon circular economy creates opportunities for trade, environment, and job creation, and can help developing countries diversify their economies and production base. So with that introduction, I'm delighted to introduce our speakers. We'll start with Mrs. Mariette Jaeger, who is the Deputy Director General of the Directorate General for International Partnerships at the European Commission. And she oversees, among many other topics, the development dimensions of the EU Green Deal. We'll then hear from Mrs. Pamela Coke-Hamilton, who's the Executive Director of the International Trade Centre. She's not only an expert in international trade and small business competitiveness, she also knows the stark realities of climate change, and she comes from the Caribbean island of Jamaica and was previously head of the Caribbean Export Development Agency. We'll then move to Sheila Agarwal Khan, who is the Director of the Economy Division at UNEP. She has deep knowledge of this topic, and she was previously Director of the Green Climate Fund and the Global Environment Facility Operations at IUCN, and she's had a long career at UNEP. And I'm also pleased to introduce our session young leader, who's Daniel Villamar, who's an advocate for sustainability in Ecuador. He's a Secretary General of Tandari, which is a collaborative youth action network for promoting and accelerating a green and inclusive transition through projects, campaigns, and advocacy. We'll also hear from Karin Jämtin, who is the Director General of the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency. She's provided us a recorded message. And I'm also delighted that we're going to have a concrete example of the circular economy in action through a short video testimony from Rosette Muhoza, who is the co-founder of My Green Home Rwanda, which is a social enterprise revolutionizing the recycling of plastic waste in Rwanda. So thank you all for being here. I'm delighted to see that we have a full panel of leaders and experts working to advance implementation of the SDGs, and that we have so many women on this panel, which is always worth mentioning. Before we start, I just remind participants that you can ask questions using the chat function, And our panelists will keep their interventions to 5 minutes. So Mariette, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. What a pleasure and honor to be in such a female panel, as you said. And of course, always a pleasure to be part of the EDDs, that it's one of the most important events for my DG. And thank you for asking me to be part of this panel, that it's extremely important talking about the new business model to basically implement the circular economy. Let me start by saying that biodiversity loss, that climate change and environmental degradation, pollution, all the challenges of our generations were there before the pandemic hit. And together with the economic and social inequalities and the digital divide, they have been a clear sign that the world is on an unsustainable path. And pandemic only exposed them further and sometimes accelerated them. And we have the obligation, the whole generation, all together, international community, academia, business, we all have really an obligation to build back better and sustainable and a greener future for the next generation. And that, I would say, it is not only our historical obligation, but we should not miss this opportunity. Because here in the European Commission, we believe that the greener transition will not only improve the environment, but will also create new opportunities for growth and jobs. And on behalf of the EU, I can say that we are fully committed to such a green recovery and will also support it globally in partnership, because our DG now is the DG International Partnership. We are really looking forward to make the circular economy partnerships the global, regional, and the country level, but also with the private sector and locally. And we believe that it's time really to reinforce the international cooperation and international efforts to build that back together and greener. So you all know that our Bible, or as our Commission President would say, our compass is a Green Deal, and the part of the Green Deal is, of course, EU Action Plan on Circular Economy that was adopted in March 2020, with a range of action to address the whole life cycle of the product, from the production to manufacturing to the production, and then use, reuse, and the end of cycle. So I can give you more about details about the Green Deal and also action plan on circular economy later. But I would say that it's most important that since the beginning of the pandemic, the EU has advocated the green recovery, and also we do walk the talk, because our ambition has been reflected in the EU own recovery plan and new generation, and EU leads by example with its recovery and resilience facility, which the bulk of the 750 billion recovery plan will be devoted to the Green Deal, meaning that the priority investment in the area related to the Green Deal, and they need to have a minimum of 37% of expenditure that should contribute to the climate action. I know that my colleague from UNEP will probably tell us that, globally, only 18% of the announced recovery measures can be considered as green. And that means that we really need to redouble our efforts, especially international efforts, to make it a bigger part and to really build back greener society. But it means also that if we are not acting now, and that we don't take the action now, we may well miss this opportunity. But to do that, we need greener economic models. And for example, a recent study that we commissioned in the European Commission on the EU-Africa cooperation on the circular economy draws similar conclusion that there is a possibility to improve the economic and situation and growth, projecting that the circular measures in a few priority sectors could lead by 2030 to an increase in Africa GDP and total employment by 2.2 to 2.7% respectively, compared to a business scenario as usual. That means that we really need to do better, and we need to take a lot of actions. And I would like to talk about what we believe in European Commission need to be done in order to succeed the major efforts for the greener recovery and the greener model. So first, I want to talk about better knowledge and evidence. That is the first condition. Second one would be improved policy frameworks and business environment. Third condition, in my view, is involvement of the private sector. The fourth, and very important, is mobilization of the finance and access to finance, especially to youth and women. And the fifth would be, of course, ensuring that the transition would be fair and just, meaning leaving no one behind, and that we do not create more inequalities. But let me try to elaborate on all 5 conditions. So first, you all know that the knowledge and awareness remain insufficient for convincing the major decision makers of the value of not only environmental requirements, but also opportunities like jobs and growth that come with the green transition, and addressing the associated challenges. And we need really further robust evidence and on possible pathways and the trade-offs. We have done a lot of guidelines already in our DG, especially to help the small and medium enterprises, but also we need more guidelines how to help design to develop the skills that will lead into that evidence. Secondly, in many countries, there is a need really to improve the business environment by means of really promoting the greener business models and sustainable markets. And this entails really having in place a coherent policy framework, I would say, that cuts all across cross area and cross sectors policy areas, including industry, environment, finance, taxation, employment, and we need really to put that packages together. It also requires really the new regulation, for example, on improved and harmonized standards, and now on the green public procurement. We are really working a lot in the European Union to do on the action plan and to implement the action plan that I mentioned before. And then thirdly, I would say the close engagement with the private sector is essential. The big businesses, and you know what I'm talking about, from Google to Amazon, they know that the circular business model brings the economic and business opportunities, but we need to work also with the smaller businesses. And therefore, the new Switch to Circular Value Chain project launched by us, EU, UNIDO, and EIB and other partners offers really the interesting model which combines support to SMEs with the engagement with the EU large companies to use the weight of their trade and green value chains. Because you all know that last mile is the most important and they need help. And fourth, access to finance and mobilization of investment is another key enabler to scaling up the green businesses and green business model. We have in the Commission European Fund for Sustainable Development Plus, which integrates the objectives of the Green Deal. And of course, the EU is equipped for contributing to this major challenge. In our global Europe regulation, we have a 30% green target, but I'm honored to report that even for the current EFSD, we have reached the target of 35% of green projects. And last but not least, as I said, transition needs to be just. And despite all the opportunities, the transition also means adjustment in some sectors, which may prove challenging, where the pandemic has really caused a huge unemployment. And those most affected must be prioritized and supported, meaning that we need to help them creating new skills and new business model. So I'm not sure if I am at the end of my time, but I think I have even exceeded it. I think that we can all do that in the very close cooperation in the international level. So this is my main message. We need the partnership of the international partners, academia, consumers, women, youth, and everyone to achieve this greener recovery. And I can tell you that on behalf of the European Commission, we will do our share, and we are really committed to make it happen. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Mahita. So I'm going to turn now directly to Pamela, who can take up the theme that you ended, which is really how can we help promote the international cooperation that is needed around this, and especially to help some of the smaller businesses that you mentioned in developing countries. Pamela, you have the floor.
Thanks so much, Carolyn. It's great to be back at EDD. I remember many years doing it as head of Caribbean Export, and it's great a platform for businesses, for organizations, and to discuss some of the most important and critical issues facing us. So I'm happy that it's an opportunity here to speak on what I see as a necessary shift from a linear to a circular economy. So it's no longer a question of if, but rather one of when and how. How can we make this a reality for developing countries? Also in the context of the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration launched last week by the Secretary General Guterres. We find that demand for raw materials and natural resources is still increasing as the global population continues its race towards 9 billion. But we know that if we're to make a serious dent on climate change impacts, we need to use fewer non-renewable resources, and we need to move to cleaner means of production. We also need an economic model which is regenerative by design and aims to gradually decouple growth from the consumption of finite resources. Circular economy concepts can offer these solutions. First, by supporting new opportunities for economic development and diversification for developing countries. And these can range from waste management and recycling to waste to energy generation and circular bioeconomy to the services related to the sharing economy. ITC's SMEs Competitiveness Outlook 2021, which we are going to launch for MSME Day on 27th of June, will highlight how climate resilience and good management of environmental risks reduce the possibility of MSMEs experiencing shocks, leading to more robust businesses and greater income security. Secondly, more sustainable production processes mean greater efficiency, thereby reducing costs for MSMEs. Cost reductions for MSMEs can also be achieved through product design, waste disposal, switching from raw materials to recycled ones, and smart packaging and transport. As Rosette will explain from her own experience on plastic waste in Rwanda. At the policy level, we have witnessed a spike in the circular economy initiatives, notably in more advanced economies. For instance, as Margetta just pointed out, in the European Union, we have the EU's Circular Economy Action Plan, the 2050 long-term strategy to achieve a climate-neutral Europe, the European Green Deal, the new consumer agenda, to name a few. At the same time, we find initiatives from advanced economies cannot be conceived independently from developing countries and their MSMEs. After all, many of these MSMEs are critical suppliers of products and services in global value chains. So new regulations might require and will require MSMEs in developing countries to begin to comply with new standards for increased traceability and transparency. Our collective aim, therefore, should be to ensure this turns circularity into an opportunity and not a burden. We cannot allow opportunities to turn into a green squeeze that shunts developing country entrepreneurs to the margins. And let's talk about these entrepreneurs. Developing countries have a large share of the global youth population. By their very nature, they are more open and receptive to innovation. Let us leverage this and invest in this. International trade has an essential role to play in enabling circular models in developing countries, in particular in transferring technology, acquiring new skills, and opening market opportunities. These are all areas in which ITC, through its Green to Compete strategy, is focusing on now. Here, the trade community need to work on three main fronts. First, they should work to reduce barriers to the trade of circular goods and services and optimize circular value chains. Secondly, they need to mainstream sustainability into the trade agreements they're negotiating. And thirdly, they need to support or push big business to support the green transition within their own value chains. In closing, let me invite you to visit our virtual stand as part of the EDDs with the theme, Small Businesses Go Green to Compete, in order to help you understand more about our work on environmental sustainability. With the challenges and opportunities of a green economy in mind, circularity is not a choice, but a requirement. I look forward to our continued excellent discussions. Thanks, Karen.
Great. Thank you so much, Pamela, for that overview and for highlighting the ways in which this move towards a greener and circular economy can be of support and help businesses in developing countries, but also the need for regulatory frameworks, trade frameworks, finance and support in order to enable this to happen. So Sheila, you're from UNEP, the Voice of the Environment and International System. I look forward to your remarks. You have the floor.
Thank you. Indeed, there's been a lot of discussion and talk about having recovery packages that are, that are going to be shifting us to a green and circular economy. But so far, actually, we've not seen that countries have taken up that opportunity. When you look at the G20, for example, since the start of the COVID pandemic, they committed $500 billion in energy financing, but over 40% of that has gone to fossil fuels. If you look at the recovery spending since the time of the COVID in 2020 alone, 14 trillion went into recovery spending, but only 20% has gone to green or more sustainable products and services like renewable energy and other more sustainably produced commodities. If you look at the way we're producing and consuming goods, whether it's extraction and processing of metals, of food, of fuel, half of what all our total global greenhouse gas emissions are coming from this processing and extraction of these commodities. We see from the data out there that the projections are showing that by 2060, we will have doubled the use of primary materials. So are we at this point really moving to a circular and let's say more green economy? The opportunities are there. If you were to look at just 5 areas, cement, aluminium, steel, plastics, and food, we could cut emissions of about 9.3 billion tons of carbon dioxide by 2050, just by focusing on these 5 commodities alone. We look at the building sector, the transport sector, the opportunities are huge. Both, for example, just the transport sector alone, we could have efficiency gains of 70% in G7 countries alone by 2050. So the key question is, how do we go about this? What are we going to do to be able to really shift to a circular and more green economy? COVID has shown us that we need to really create opportunities for societies across the different sectors, right from upstream down to the consumer, the user and consumption of that product. And so it means working across from businesses to the general public and governments to seeing how can that enabling environment be created so that businesses and consumers can make the right choices and shift and earn still, in fact, probably even better revenue than the current situation. UNEP has worked with a number of partners on an eco-innovation program with small and medium-sized enterprises. And as you know, SMEs occupy something like 90% of businesses worldwide, and they create 7 out of 10 jobs globally. So the opportunities are huge if we were to focus on SMEs, in addition to looking at all the other sectors of society where if you were to follow the value chains right from upstream, where you're extracting and then producing materials, right down to the consumer level, we have shown through our eco-innovation program, which worked with the dairy industry, textiles, with products that are used in the fashion and beauty industry, that 80% of those companies that we worked with were able to actually generate increased revenues from processing and using commodities in much more sustainable manners. So I look forward to our discussion today to seeing how can we move to a business model that looks at all sectors of society in this way to create an environment in which we are producing and goods and services in more sustainable manners? Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Sheila. As we're running a little short on time, I'm going to shift directly to you, Daniel. Please tell us a little bit about your experience in Ecuador with the work that you're doing. You have the floor.
Thank you, Caroline. Young leaders are key for transforming our communities and promoting a green, inclusive, and circular recovery. We must dare to take bold decisions that bring us closer to a sustainable future. Investing in youth is one of them. I have brought some inspiring stories of young leaders who are transforming their communities in Ecuador. These leaders were part of the Dream Lab, an ambitious project developed by Tandari in collaboration with UNICEF and the United Nations Development Programme. This project developed the skills and gave mentorships and seed capital to 91 young leaders so they could transform their ideas into real impact in their communities. For example, Karen was part of this Dream Lab. She is from Tumbaco, an eastern county in Quito. She saw how senior adults in her community were unemployed and struggled to make a living. She also identified a poor waste management and pollution. She signed up for the Dream Lab and got together with some friends to develop a project called Yacta Huerto. It consists of an urban farm that uses organic waste to produce compost and creates jobs for senior adults in her community. The organic food they produce is sold locally at a fair price that allows them to maintain their activities. This is just one of the many stories I can share with you of young leaders that can transform their communities thanks to a project that gave them the tools to do so. But what may happen if we develop a similar project focused on a green and circular recovery? We have had excellent experience with young leaders developing innovative solutions around the circular economy here in Ecuador. For example, Resi. You can find this app. It's called the Resi app. It has been developed by 3 young women leaders at the National Polytechnical University, which connects recyclers with users that separate their garbage. It creates decent jobs, improves the life quality of recyclers, and promotes circularity in Ecuador. This app encourages an adequate separation of the materials by giving its users reward points each time they deliver materials to their recycler. These points can be later changed for coupons and discounts in local businesses. What if more young entrepreneurs have the opportunity of learning about circularity and other tools that allow them to create new business models, projects, and campaigns? This question inspired us as Tandari to create a circular economy school. We're aiming to become a flagship project for a green, inclusive, and circular recovery in Ecuador and Latin America, as it will develop the skills of 100 young leaders who will be able to create new business models, development projects, and advocacy campaigns. The Circular Economy School is especially focused on young leaders that cannot have access to higher education or employment opportunities. This allows us to ensure the economic inclusion of youth while transitioning to a green and circular economy. We need the support of the international community to make this project happen. We want to learn from your experiences, strengthen our academic plan, and have some of your best professionals as teachers. We also need your financial support to make this project a reality. Promoting circularity in Ecuador is a hard challenge because our culture is based on the exploitation of natural resources and the responsible production of waste. Our Circular Economy School is a bold action for putting youth at the front of a green, inclusive, and circular recovery. We know that we will be working together very closely and cooperating for a greener future.
Wow, Daniel, that's super inspiring. And I think I appreciate most about the work that you're doing is that it has this multiplier effect, that you're getting you're going to expand the capacity for more people in your country to take up this approach. And it seems like something that would be great to have in other countries around the world as well. After all, we can all sit and talk at high-level panels about these issues, and it will rely on people like you on the ground making all of these things happen. So thank you for that introduction. I'm going to turn now to a video message from Karin Jämtin, who is the Director General of the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency.
Thank you for organizing this plenary. The climate crisis and the depletion of biodiversity are among the greatest risks to development in the world. Our partner countries are at risk of being hit hard and need support in order to adapt economies, adapt stronger food security, and create social structures. At the same time, an inclusive green economic recovery from COVID-19 can have positive effects in terms of both job opportunities as well as moving the green agenda forward. SDG 12 on sustainable consumption and production is important, to say the least. Circular economy is clearly reflected in the policy framework for Swedish development cooperation. It concludes that Sweden should contribute to, and I quote, a transformation to a resource-efficient, non-toxic, circular, and bio-based economy with low emissions of greenhouse gases, end of quote. We need to leverage broad engagement around the global goals to enable a shift towards a circular economic model. Allow me to mention 3 entry points that I believe are crucial. First, we acknowledge the importance and the driving force of the private sector and financial actors in developing circular business models. SIDA engages with Swedish investors and our multinational companies through several networks. Together, we seek to enable a green and just transition, leaving no one behind. Second, we realize the importance of building institutional structures and capacities. We have intensified our collaboration with and through Swedish government authorities, and that is, of course, to enhance their peer collaboration with sister authorities in our partner countries. By engaging both private and public actors, we believe that our work will be more impactful. Last, but very much not least, trade and international collaboration will be crucial elements to achieve a global shift. SIDA welcomes EU's Green Deal and our joint Team Europe initiatives focusing on circular economy at all levels. We will actively seek to join forces to develop enabling institutions at country level, frameworks for trade, engaging with the private sector to promote circularity, and to mobilize and steer investments towards a green shift. Let me conclude by stating that circular economy approaches require us all to focus on the much needed systemic solutions. We will use our financing and expertise, and we will do this to dialogue and to identify smart initiatives together with our partners. We will, of course, do this with the aim of making a difference, the biggest difference possible. Thank you for listening, and I hope you will have a productive meeting.
My name is Rosette Mohoza, and I'm the co-founder of My Green Home. So the story of My Green Home starts at college, where 2 colleagues had environmental sustainability at the core of the heart. When we got together, we wanted to come up with a solution that is contributing to a global challenge, which is plastic waste. Plastic waste is a very big challenge since only 9% of it is recycled. So that means the rest ends up in dump site and ocean, becoming a threat to the aquatic life and also human beings in general. This is how My Green Home comes in. We're a social enterprise that is revolutionizing a circular economy through recycling of plastic waste into eco-friendly construction materials. Our main goal is to create durable products from plastic waste that are sustainable and locally produced, creating green jobs, and also contributing to environmental sustainability. To talk a little bit about our products, we're now producing outdoor pavers that are 3 times durable compared to normal ones. They're eco-friendly, but also they're affordable to our clients. So in brief, we're looking forward to having people join us to this cause. I know circular economy is a concept that is new to everyone, not even in Rwanda, but also on a global basis. But we believe with creating awareness and also bringing up new ideas like this and technologies, people get to know more about circular economy. Thank you very much.
That was also great to hear from Rosetta, a really concrete project from the ground. So I'm going to turn to our first round of questions now. We've had excellent presentations, and I wanted to follow up on some of the key points. So firstly, for Mahete, you talked about the EU's Green Deal and the ambition that you have to set higher standards that would set the example across supply chains and help drive the ambition for decarbonization and greater circularity. The question I have in my mind is, how does this ambition affect producers in developing countries? And how can the EU's development cooperation help support them in making sure that they get a good share of these greener supply chains?
Thank you. Of course, this is the excellent question. And I would start saying that, of course, we want sustainable products to be the norm on the market. And of course, the new initiatives that we are proposing are fully in line with that. I mean, not only the policies from right to repair, green claims, procurement, and then industrial emission. I mean, everything we do on the issues of batteries, plastic, textile, I would say electronics, packaging, even the end life of cars, I mean, is something that the EU is defining the standards that will be mandatory in the EU. But of course, on sustainable products policy under the Circular Economy Action Plan, and also sustainable corporate governance. And of course, we would like our international partners and our partner countries to follow the norms because this is coherent with our environmental and climate ambition. It also reinforces our policy coherence, I would say, internal and external, because we would like also to help our partner countries to adjust, because we are basically not helping to their sustainable development and growth by just accepting to our market the standards or products with the standards that would not meet, the circular and the Green Deal standards. But I do admit, and there is a risk, however, that the producers in some countries may struggle to meet the requirements. And we are currently really reinforcing our tools to assess the impact on how the EU legislation may affect the partners in the third countries. And we also intend to basically use our cooperation with the private sector and provide aid for trade supporting business complying with the standards on the market. Because, for example, in the EU, we are going to put together some kind of system of awarding the businesses that are leading in the circular recovery and transition, and also to give incentives to our industry. And I would say that our international partnership policy, and especially everything that we do within the Team Europe, should follow these incentives, that we will assist our partners in order to be able to match the standards. But clearly there will be the transition needed, and of course we will need our assistance to that objective. And let me conclude that 50% of our Team Europe initiatives are already oriented into the green recovery, and I'm absolutely sure that together with our partner countries, we will find a way to help and support the small and medium-sized enterprises in order to get through this transition. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Maheta. I mean, it's very good to see how much the EU is putting emphasis on this idea of supporting the producers in other countries. I guess one of the challenges also is that we hear a lot about the potential of more public finance for developing countries for development in general and for greening their economies. But we also see a lot of gaps. This week at the G7, there's been so much discussion of the huge climate finance gap. So hopefully the EU can also use some of your leadership to encourage other economies to step up and do the same, because really, I think for many developing countries that there's a lot of goodwill and interest in this, but a lot of the promised support doesn't actually come through either from the public sector or from the private sector. So I think we need to keep that in mind. And also what Sheila said, they continue to do the wrong thing as well, right? It's one thing about doing the right thing, but we also need to stop financing the wrong things as well in order to provide a real incentive structure. So I'll turn now to Pamela. We've heard a lot from Daniel and from Rosetta, really inspiring examples from the ground of people trying to really move forward this new economy and some of the challenges that young entrepreneurs face. So be interested in your experience from the ITC on what the sort of priorities for policymakers could be to help small businesses in developing countries make this transition.
Thanks, Caroline. I think that there are three main priorities, and I think it would be important to look at this from the perspective of the country, then down to the policymakers, then to the entrepreneurs themselves. The first one would be, local policymakers need to ensure regulatory and policy coherence among the domestic developmental policies, the environmental management objectives, and the trade policy goals. In other words, it has to be a coherent structure that supports an integrated approach to this process. And beyond coherence, countries should adopt also a facilitative policy instrument for the green transition. So fiscal policies, incentivizing green MSMEs, IP laws that reward innovation, and strong integration among domestic and regional markets, as we likely also observe a reconfiguration of value chains with production centers more closely located at the point of consumption as a result of COVID-19. The second one is governments need to work closely with banks and financiers, and we just talked about access to finance and the difficulty getting this, and this is so much more accurate when it comes to MSMEs. So particularly with microfinance institutions or impact investors, to try to guarantee access to finance to green MSMEs who usually struggle with accessing credit from commercial banks. They often are required to present long-term collateral financing for investment with uncertain returns. So MSMEs need to be supported with more innovative tools such as seed funding, impact investment instruments, among others. And finally, the skills are a key determinant for the development of green MSMEs. Access to the skills necessary to apply green technologies along with basic entrepreneurial education is usually scarce. So it's going to be crucial to gear up firms and educational institutions such as universities, TVET institutions, accelerators and incubators of business ideas to upgrade industry skill sets. For the green transition to be just, it is equally important to retrain and realign skills in sectors that will decline as a result of it. So in essence, what I'm saying is that the ecosystem needs to be put in place to ensure and to promote the utilization and the transition of MSMEs to a green economy. Without that, we continue to speak about it, but the systems are not in place to actually support it and make it a viable option for a lot of MSMEs. And that is going to be critical moving forward. Thanks.
Great. Thank you very much, Pamela. And I think this idea of an enabling policy framework is really useful for us to keep in mind. It shouldn't just be these businesses. There seem to be so much inspiration and motivation to do these things. So we need to ensure that companies have the support they need in terms of financing and a coherent policy framework. So turning now to you, Sheila, we've heard about the importance of MSMEs in fostering a circular economy and making sure that they have a role and can benefit from this. But what other players do you think are really key to moving this agenda forward? And I'm thinking here also of your background working at UNEP with environment ministries, but also with some of the big international environmental funds and finance facilities. If you could tell us how they fit into this bigger picture, that would be great.
Thanks. I think the key issue is to have a whole of society approach where you have all actors at very different stages along you could say the value chains of the different commodities or goods and services that are a focus. If you were to look at the upstream side, you need to have the right enabling environment in place to be able to set the framework in a way and set the right incentives, removing, let's say, subsidies that are going to lock us into an unsustainable path, to then creating the incentives to allow us to be able to have not just the SMEs, but large companies and other actors to be able to benefit and to position themselves to take advantage of the let's say the market opportunities that would exist. The finance sector is going to be another big player. UNEP supports the finance initiative, which has partners from the banking, the insurance, and the investment sectors, and they're responsible, let's say, principles for responsible investment, principles for responsible banking. It would be very interesting to see how governments are trying to harness this kind of interest in really shifting us to a more circular economy. And then, of course, there's the consumer end of things, because none of this is going to work unless the consumers actually want those kind of products and services that are more sustainable. So again, the enabling environment to be able to create that, whether it's certification, whether it's tax incentives and all, that would basically help us. Now, you have global financial mechanisms like the Green Climate Fund, the Global Environment Facility, but you also have the development finance institutions out there who can help to create this kind of enabling environment to get us to, let's say, to go over that hurdle, that whether it's the companies that are facing it or governments that are facing a hurdle, these are why these mechanisms are set up to really get us, whether it's grant or concessional financing or a blended approach, to be able to get us over that hurdle to get us onto a sustainable path.
Great. Thank you very much, Sheila. I'm going to turn now to Daniel. You have given us some examples of what you're trying to do through your school in Ecuador, and of course, Ecuador has extraordinary biodiversity and all and I think a strong history of concern about the environment domestically. Could you tell us a little bit a concrete example of one of the activities that your initiative is supporting?
Well, let me talk to you about a principle, an Andean principle that's called the summa causae. It means that if we are in harmony with ourselves, if we're in harmony with our community, and we're in harmony with nature, we're going to live a life well lived. And this is the philosophy that guides our School of Circular Economy. We seek to promote leaders that are strong in their psychological beliefs, in their psychological framework, in order to enable them to lead our society towards a greener future. One concrete example is how young leaders are restoring our damaged ecosystems. Some ecosystems that have been subject of deforestation, for example, are being taken by young leaders, for example, in Manabí. They're taking these native plants and they're restoring these ecosystems, and they're investigating on how these native plants can bring us new solutions. For example, new medicine or new textiles that can foster new economies in our country. So this is a real challenge, because this means that we have to make an effort in order to find new solutions inside biodiversity. But we have to first take care of biodiversity and then develop an economic plan in order to get a benefit from it. So we need international cooperation in order to develop this, because as I already told you, our economies are highly dependent on oil and mining in order to produce income. But what if international cooperation helps our countries to discover the rich materials and the economic potential that has biodiversity in our country? So this is a call for the international community to invest in Ecuador, to come and work together with universities, with young leaders, in order to promote the creation of a new bioeconomy, of a new circular economy that helps us foster a green and circular recovery.
Great. Thank you very much, Daniel. Let me just go back to this challenge of perhaps around cooperation among international organizations on this issue of fostering a green and sustainable recovery, because we hear a lot of talk about this, and there's a lot of work among international organizations to try and support efforts by governments and business and stakeholders. And yet, I guess the question in my mind is do we have enough of that yet? Who do we really need to push forward to take this agenda forward? Because we did hear, for example, last week at the G7, a lot of the same talk, and yet we didn't hear a significant increase in aid for trade or in spending around climate finance. We didn't hear concrete commitments to that. And at the same time, we do know that some of these governments are continuing, for example, to invest in unsustainable production and consumption. So, for example, through fossil fuel subsidies. So just this sense of sort of a reality check on the one hand, and how can we do better at the international community level? So perhaps like to start first with Maheta.
Yes, thank you. You're absolutely right. I can only speak for the EU. And as I said before, we like to lead by example. So you see our Green Deal, our legislative agenda, Fit 55, what we are doing internationally, also to the way to Glasgow, to COPs. I mean, it's really our utmost to ensure the green transition and recovery. Of course, we are talking to our international partners, you mentioned G7, in order to get support to our agenda. And also, as I said, we integrated the Green Deal and green recovery, sustainable recovery in our development policy. So our international partnerships agendas are prioritizing basically the green transition. So also what we are trying to do is to put the sustainable finance into the green recovery, meaning not only that we enlarge our EFSD guarantee, because we added to our toolbox to grants and blending also the guarantees. And the current one, as I said before, that contributed to 50 billion investment, contributed 35% to the green recovery. And we have, for example, resilient cities or small loans guarantees program with the IFC just for small and medium enterprises. Plenty of projects that contribute really concretely to the agenda, but I think that we need to do more. We need to work more really on sustainable finance, equity, Green Deal, green bonds, etc., in order to put together international, also the EU level, the means that will bring our partners to the same objectives and to the same standards. But as I said before, also with our new programming with the Global Europe instruments, where we have a 30% target, and the Green Deal, we expect really to scale up the support to the green business development globally. And I can only reaffirm and reconfirm our commitment to that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. I turn to Pamela.
Sorry, thanks. Yes. We wanted to talk about the issue of what the level of collaboration should be. Let me start by saying I think it's really critical that international organizations start to mainstream environmental sustainability into their development plans. And also into their aid for trade programming, because this is critical if we don't have the financing to actually support it. And in terms of coordination with other organizations and seeking complementarity of actions, both locally and internationally. It's the approach that needs to be adopted, and there are promising initiatives in the UN system helping us to move away from the silos approach. For example, the Environment Management Group called for a multi-agency effort for coordinated action for a green recovery. And we have ITC, WHO, ILO, UNEP, UNFCCC, among others, contributing to this. And at the country level, the regional coordinating office, the regional country offices is going to be crucial. We also have, as I mentioned before, the Green to Compete strategy, and ITC is fully committed to contributing to the coordination. And we know that through this, we can best support the MSMEs specifically to seize the opportunities of the green transition. One of the ways we've been doing this, and I mentioned this in terms of the circular economy, is that we have a project very close to home called the Alliances for Coconut Industry Development in the Caribbean. And what we're doing is we're building alliances to foster collaboration among many local and international partners. So the project supports entrepreneurs in Barbados to extract value from coconut waste originating from the production of coconut products. And we use the bioreactor technology, and the project is piloting the transformation of coconut husks into biogas and digested for consumption at local farms. So in this way, the project responds to a serious health and waste management issue affecting the island, and also at the same time supports green growth. And let me look at the several ways in which international agencies such as ITC, UNEP, UNCTAD and others can support MSEs to go green. First, we need to improve the knowledge base of climate and environmental implications for value chains and MSMEs, and offer a platform for information and best practices. Secondly, we should also support local business support organizations to enhance their portfolio of services for MSMEs to go green. For example, through the same Green to Compete hubs that we've established across the world. They use ITC tools and BSOs provide services to the MSMEs to become more climate resilient and move towards circular production models. And finally, in order to drive systemic change, we need to align trade and environmental policy. And as these are aligned with the priorities of developing countries, then we can have a thriving green economy. So we're committed to doing that support moving forward. We've already started the process, and we think that is those are some of the best methodologies to achieve the kind of alignment among international organizations that we'd like to see. Thanks, Carolyn.
Great. Thank you, Pamela. Sheila, I'm just going to give you just half a minute, and then it's time for me to close.
Okay, I'll just add something to complement what Pamela said. I think that we should all be looking to seeing how we are pulling in the same direction. So on the one hand, we shouldn't be giving out grants and all to support the movement towards a circular economy. And then on the other hand, new debt is being issued, or countries are struggling with paying their current debt in ways that is going to make the economy unsustainable. I think we should also be looking at how the banking system, the insurance system are all pulling in the same direction. So we need to be looking at this from multiple angles so that we can all pull from the same direction. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Sheila. So I have the job of trying to wrap up all of this in 2 minutes, but I do think we've had some key themes that have come through. The first one is coherence, which is a word we use a lot in international policy arena, but I think here it's really, really important. And I think Pamela has emphasized, also the importance of coordination. And one of the things I do think is quite inspiring about the circular economy concept is that it's engaging many different types of organizations in the private sector, but also across the UN system. You find people from UNIDO, from the World Bank. You find bilateral agencies. You hear UNEP. So it's quite a unifying concept, actually, because it brings together different policymakers. We've also heard about the importance of policy coherence at the international level, so that we create an enabling environment, both in terms of trade policy, but also in terms of financial policy, development assistance, green aid for trade, and so on, that can provide a set of incentives that work. And I think importantly, we've heard about making sure that we're not at the same time continuing to sustain the old economy and to sort of disincentivize the very shift that we're trying to create. And so we need to move away from the old ways at the same time as we're moving towards the new ways. We won't get there if we're continuing, for example, to finance unsustainable production and consumption. I think this is a really key point. And finally, one of the issues that has come up is this importance of partnerships between the local level and the international level. In reality, to make this sort of shift to greener economies, the examples that we've heard are really very local, regional, national examples. And so somehow we need to link those effectively to this wider international policy discussion and these financial instruments that we've talked about. And I think here, Pamela's point also about working with national and regional and local banks to help them provide the kind of financing and support that's necessary. So it's something that at the same time is very local, but at the same time we need to foster this more global discussion. And just a very last point, I think, from Daniel, which is also the importance of fostering a new generation of consumers who are interested in buying these products as well. And so I think here we shouldn't underestimate the continued importance of public awareness and campaigns around the importance of these environment issues locally and for the economy, for resilience and for sustainability. So thank you all for taking the time. It's been a pleasure to speak with you all this morning. Thank you very much.